Some of our attendees today, oh, some of our attendees are members, and then attend some webinars like this, but others are new to the organization. What does ISM mean to you?
I think it means education. I think it means management, relationship, and I'm going to point back to influence again. So I think, if you are not if you don't have, and I do think that there's a right number of years, that if you are new to procurement, you're new to supply chain, gaining any of your certifications is is so imperative because you need to be up on understanding on the clarity of what expectations are around procurement. Now, I'm going to contradict that in a minute because I'm going to say what and how we used to think the principles of procurement stood tall
Mm-hmm.
have altered over these years, right? And I'm going to talk a lot about risk because I think the world is really risky, and from our role from so we'll get to that. But I think sharing in a community where we get to listen, Dupree, you and I know each other. We've known each other now for a handful of years. You are a friend. You are someone who, if I have procurement questions, and there's a lot of questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about how we can talk about language and in our effects. We can talk about the software and platforms that are out there in the world. We can talk about who do you know, right? If I have a position that's open, and let's flip that around. If I'm looking for a position, right? How do we do these things? We maneuver them through our community, and ISM to me has been the community. I don't know that there's another that stands up to it in for supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. And that's one of the things I find so helpful about each individual chapter is that we can then create that local in person as well as virtual um, network and find commonalities locally within the local economy where we can actually make an influence, but also ensure that we're making good business decisions across multiple industries. A lot of the folks in pharma likely stay in pharma. Your IT folks, especially even IT category leads, tend to be in their own silos, logistics, indirect, right? But ISM allows us to have the luxury of being amongst folks where we don't have to explain what is procurement. Our historical iceberg of what people think is procurement and all the other stuff that it really contains.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is to be able to reach across an aisle of industry and say, well, in my industry, I do something in this with this workflow, where maybe the other person's workflow looks a little bit different, and you get to glean some insight from how process works. When we've seen that, and again, we're going to jump into AI at some point, but we've seen that with AI. How do you use AI? Right? How do we start out? And there is a starting place to AI, and there is a slow but mighty build of how we implement AI systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I,
Well,
I don't I don't know that people understood that. And I think that's again, I'm just going to point back to ISM. One of the imperative reasons for ISM is to have people say you might want to slow down a little bit on that, right? You
well,
might
at least
want
have that dialogue, right?
to have
That
the
we have
conversation.
multiple opinions on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, we've definitely touched on, you've brought us a lot of teasers for the topics we wanted to cover today. And at ISM, you did talk about, like, we can call it intentional sourcing, we could talk it bold sourcing. Um, Help us understand this concept as you've have you started to socialize it. What does bold sourcing mean?
I love that. So I've really spent my career talking about bold and intentional spend. And what that means is, and I'd really like to think about, again, you're going to hear me say it's 2026 as if y'all don't know. Um, but we're facing some economic challenges ahead of us that we have not seen before. That doesn't make it the worst we've ever seen. It doesn't make the best. It's just we have not seen these specific type of challenges. And where our money goes matters. And when I think about Main Street and I think about, the idea that Amazon came in, and I'm not arguing whether they have a good process or a good platform or a good system or if they should or shouldn't be in business. I'm not, that's actually a conversation I'm not interested in having. The conversation I'm interested in having is at some point in all of our histories with our time with Amazon, we recognized that we were no longer doing business with our local Main Street. And there has been and continues to be this moment in time where we are clutching pearls and saying, it's a real shame about Main Street. That is as intentional as the moment we recognized we were no longer purchasing from our Main Street.
It's accepting the trade-off between online convenience versus the horrible thing of physically getting out of your house, getting away from your phone, and driving into a store.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And the problem is that now we're going to point to the people. And, it's at some point procurement needs to be able to go and bring our conversations very big, very high. And we also need to go and bring it down to the people. Because as we have done, as people, as personal buyers have done with Main Street, there is a fear, and it's a real fear that we are moving small business into um, the same end, if you will. I don't mean to be a doomsdayer about that either, but there is, clear evidence that if we are not spending our dollars locally, we are all people who work at companies, and our companies have locations. And if our location is not spending money in our zip code, that is where our partners and our children need jobs, need to go to school. They need to be able to run down the street and get a sandwich. They need to go get their hair cut. If we're not building out these environments and these neighborhoods, um, we are doing a disservice with those purchase orders, with that
Hmm.
economic policy that we are writing purchase orders to and from. The acknowledgement that small business exists for the entire economy here in the United States. So, over 72% of all businesses in the United States are small businesses.
I
And
even
that's
recently heard that statistic was even higher within a certain number of employees. I mean, then,
It's incredible,
yeah.
right? I mean, even at, 70, 75, 80,
Hmm.
depending. And we're really talking about that small to medium, to
Hmm.
mid-size organization. That's a significant number of people. That's a significant population in the United States. And this is not, there's been a lot of conversations around whether or not we should export or import and where we should import and export from. Again, those conversations exist and they're valid and they're important. That's not even this conversation. This conversation is, are you protecting the places in which your organizations are doing business?
So would you
Um,
say then bold would then be really taking a courageous step and going against the mold?
that
Is
is
that
what
where
I'm
bold come
saying.
in?
That is where bold comes in, right? Bold comes in with it, whether during this time of this anti-DEI, we have removed the conversation around supplier diversity more times than not. This isn't about supplier diversity right now. This is about recognizing that our economy is built on the backs of small businesses, and your personal locations are built on those small businesses. So somewhere we're not making the boldness is, are we making the connection between where we live, and pushing our businesses' dollars outward so that they're not spent internally. So the boldness is, please be bold, please do better, please spend your money where your feet are. Because it is imperative if you want those feet to be able to walk on a nice park
Hmm.
or walk down a nice street, you need to have that money going back into that location. That's the boldness. Stand up for
So,
it.
so here's the predicament, and you know this as a practitioner, is that and when we take on procurement projects and we've got this big savings target or efficiency target, whatever these are, right? A new CEO has come in, or a new chief procurement officer has come in. They're being tasked with there is a problem, right? Houston, there is a problem, and we need you
Mhm.
to solve it.
Sure.
As procurement folks, we often don't have that time to really be bold and intentional. We're in not even we're reactive mode is an understatement.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how, but on the flip side, if I rephrase what you were talking about with bold is, small businesses are the embodiment of the American dream. Hey,
Correct.
I want to make it. I have this dream. I want to realize it. And if we invest locally, we're helping keep that spirit and the proof of the American dream alive. Um, but at the same time, then we've got this challenge of having to hurry up, and the no different than ordering on Amazon. The easiest way to then get these savings is going with first who you already have, and then
Yes.
get a select few of those that our executives or stakeholders claim is legit, a
Yep.
perception thing,
Yep.
and then going to bid, getting the three bids, getting a few percentage points off, claim it, the CFO signs off, we move on to the next project.
Yep.
That's a tough balance to reach.
It's a tough balance. I'm gonna tell you that where I believe the balance is, kind of starts. I'm an adjunct professor at Northeastern University, and I teach a class where we talk about kind of ethics in supply chain. And I seem to always start at the same place because to me, my ethics line and your ethics line, it is probably not the same, right? Where we draw our lines is different. So I often talk about a crooked line around ethics. So my question back to you has to be, if we want to do best, cheapest price, we can, and I don't mean to be rude about this, we can go out and we can hire, some 6-year-olds who are going to be able to put things together,
Mm-hmm.
and we're probably going to be able to save some money.
Yeah.
We've created an ethics line in which most people in the United States have said, no, no, you've gone too far. Okay. So we've established what the age to work is, and we're all comfortable with that. We have to know personally where we stand and what we stand for. And my argument around, and this is not political, this is fact, Citizens United has the ability that companies are people.
Mm-hmm.
These companies are,
Dating back to the Latin, corporation, a body, right? Yeah.
that's right. Thank you for bringing us back to Latin. Appreciate that. That's we don't get that too often. But if we think about that, a corporation must have its own ethical line where it understands and recognizes what its intention is to do business. And as human beings, we have to recognize what our intention is to do business. I literally just had a conversation with a small business a little while ago. I was helping with a go-to-market, and we were talking about, who are you going to do business with? And, as many small businesses, her answer started with, well, kind of anybody who'll pay me. I said, well, let's back up. Let's draw your line. We need to draw your line. And the line is, for me, I have my personal lines. She has her, you have yours. Companies have theirs. So how do we define and hold leadership responsible for creating what that ethical line actually means? Because again, the argument is and can always be that extreme. Well, sure, maybe we didn't save as much money as we could have on this one, but we also didn't hire 6-year-olds, right? So if is that where we're starting, or are we starting where our line says we start? Our line says we're going to start with understanding that a percentage of our dollars needs to promote the state that we live in or the zip code that we live in. There is we need I mean, because we can talk about companies all we want, and this is the wonderful thing about procurement. procurement people have the right, the need, and are practically the only people within an organization who can ensure where that money gets sent. Ish. I'm going to add the ish because I know we have a lot of varying degrees of ownership that are currently on this call. But if we're not the starting place, if we're not being bold, if we don't recognize that if it is not us, then who it within an organization is going to drive this message, who exactly is going to do it? Because although we might be busy in procurement, the business unit themselves are just out trying to keep the mill running.
Because
And
that's what we're measured. We're measured for our employability based off of that is the metric for value.
say that
Money.
one more time.
Like our value as the ROI of paying us our salary is based on oftentimes the money that we're able to either encourage generate on the revenue generation side or the COGS or the CapEx and OpEx piece.
Yes, I mean, I do think that, what we've been lucky enough to see in the past handful of years is the movement away from procurement being a cost savings only model, right? Because, the old days of getting suppliers on the phone and say, screaming, give me my 3%, slam on the phone, like those days are over. I started in procurement almost 30 years ago. That was pretty much
Standard.
our standard bag of
Yeah.
tricks, right?
Yeah.
Is, go back to the suppliers and get 3%. And if they don't want it, we're not going to do business with them, right? We're moving into a model where we recognize that it is actually relationship based. And part of relationships is understanding and giving value to both sides of the equation. Um,
Mhm.
One of the things that I kind of hang my hat on this, it happened many years ago. I was at an organization and we had one of our critical suppliers, almost $100 million a year in spend. And we got the call and the supplier said, yeah, you know what? We're not going to renew with you this year.
Mhm.
And that would have been from the procurement perspective, it was devastating. From the operational perspective, it was, well, we don't have enough time, right? We don't have enough time to implement a new supplier. We've got to do something.
We're always used to us terminating. It's not the supplier terminating from us.
Right. But then when we kind of sat down in a mediation and internal mediation, what we recognized is we were sending horrible files. Our data files were going over. They had a failure rate of like in the 70s, 60, 70%. And they said, you are literally putting us out of business, right? And for an organization to not recognize that the havoc that we were creating, and we're a large organization, and this was probably a mid-market, small mid-market in today's market, small mid-market organization. And here we are, and they have hired two, three people additional to process the operations of managing our large organization's data file because we couldn't do it correctly on the front side. That's the value. So when I say bold, the boldness of that one was that we created a reverse SLA in order to hold on to this supplier, right? It was, how do we do better? How do we do better by our supplier in performing the work that we're performing? And in this process, we're recognizing that the team that's delivering most of these files are receiving bonus after bonus for the work that's done
Wow.
right? They're so speedy in their process, but they're so speedy in the process because they were sending over terrible files. So I give this as a procurement's role is no longer just beat the supplier up for 3%. It really is about, do you understand the aggregate role that that supplier plays within the organization? Are you able to build out and enhance their role, right? Do we have some, I like to talk about discovery, retention, and development. Do we have some development aspects of how do we engage a supplier so that they're able to do bigger, better, stronger, or faster, more efficient? And are we as the larger organization, or are we as the other organization able to support that movement in order to create those efficiencies? So again, when we ask what is bold, that's bold. The bold is, how do we look at the aggregate relationship and see opportunity. Um,
So I got a
because,
question on that. I got a
yeah,
question if we're going to tie in on that because by being intentional and talking through making then policy and governance and standard aligned ways of doing work, that's one thing. But I'm also hearing from you about values. What are the
mm,
corporation's values? Now, the corporation's values are oftentimes what I've seen on the HR, the people, maybe compliance. If you're in pharma, of course, right? We need to maintain our certifications or ISOs, whatever, manufacturing, same thing. But where are you seeing actual procurement putting in their own values?
I'm seeing that from the CPO level.
Really? Okay.
I'm seeing it from the category manager level, right? I'm thinking of a client right now where, um, we were building out, and I don't believe that it was my influence because I think that this had been kind of already in motion. Um, but I'm thinking about this young gentleman who had a particular he had an MRO category. He was an MRO category manager, and he took this upon himself. So he no longer wanted to just renew. Now he renewed, of course, the kind of the standard big suppliers that were part of his MRO, but he also added that intentional redundancy, which I think is a risk mitigator, right? So, when you have a large organization, but you're able to support it with a small electrical contractor, right? Again, from the MRO perspective, from this gentleman's work, um, he was able to kind of retain an electrician as a secondary component for the operation. It cost him probably less than the insurance. I mean, we also recognize how much money we pay in business insurance and when we insure everything within our organization, but
Hmm.
we don't add in that layer of redundancy around our business continuity where we could pick up small businesses as that second or additional insurance layer and add that into the mix. Um, I think immediately back to that guy though, because I think that I haven't spoken to him in probably 2 years, and now you're going to make me call him because I need to call him and find out where he's at. But he's to me one of those people, the young people that I meet, and I'm really hopeful about where their growth is and where they're headed around procurement, around supply chain, because I think we need leaders who are driving the humanity of what procurement is and what it allots to the rest of us, right? To the rest of us and the rest of our businesses. Um,
Well,
I hope
that's where I think that's where I don't see that very often. I have not seen it very often across a lot of organizations where you kind of see that. I saw that. I've seen it at a few companies here locally where I've worked. Um, that we wanted to say, hey, in every bid, you must include a local private small business of different whatever the type of ownership is, if it's veteran, woman, whatever, right? But at least include them. And then and then there's another organization I know quite well here that in the Raleigh Durham area that not only does it, but they were able to really find a superhero to help them through COVID. They found a company that helped them manufacture PPE for their workforce, using a small partner that had a different way of doing business. And so that's where maybe we want to, if we can kind of segue into that, is
yeah. Can
why,
I just back
like
on
if
one
the
one thing?
difference. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one thing you just said though was, ensuring that small businesses are 20% of the bid, right? So assuming a five supplier, we're going to ensure one
Yeah.
is. I think what I'm talking about is where where are you pulling those four large organizations? If we know, and not just we believe, if we know because we have data to support and evidence that over 70% of the country's businesses are small businesses. We know that to be so. How is it that we're able to dig into the 20+% and always ensure that we have a 4-to-1 ratio against the 70%? That's the piece that doesn't make sense. And I want to go back to earlier, you said it's really about, there's time. We don't have enough time in procurement, and that's true. But we do have systems that allow us a pre-vetting. And I think,
Mm.
most things in our life we don't go in so ill prepared as we kind of do for the suppliers that are going to be invited to an RFX. We work so darn hard on building out that RFX, ensuring that we've spoken to all the stakeholders. We do all of that work, which I am not underestimating. It is wonderful work when we bring together, when we write just that perfect RFP. But where and what I'm calling on procurement folks to do is vet your suppliers with that same amount of due diligence. Have a bench of suppliers broken down by category that you're going to be able to tap when the time comes. That you didn't you initiate those conversations 6 months out and you say, this is what we're building. Here's the additional question. These small businesses are flexible, they're agile, they're probably more deeply involved in day-to-day conversations around their industry than those larger organizations are. I'm just going to say that just I believe it, so I'm going to say it. That one's my belief, though. But what I'm going to say about that is your ability to tap on the shoulder of a small business and say, this is how we're building out this RFP. These are some of the things that we're taking into consideration. What do you know about the market? What are you seeing in regards to some collaborations that are happening out there that we should be privy to as our mid-sized, large-sized company? What should we be keeping our eyes on in regards to what's coming down the pike? These small businesses are going to feed that. That's how you build that bench. And I've told you for years now, Dupree, like I don't know how or why I started a company. I really just wanted a good category manager job with a company that would just let me own the whole category, right? Because if we empower category managers to become subject matter experts in what they do, they can fly, and
Mm.
we as the organizations will do nothing but receive benefit after benefit of category managers who are able to hold stakeholders' feet to the fire to make better decisions or stronger decisions or bolder decisions. And the category manager themselves will be seamless within that industry.
So I guess that leads me then to another topic you mentioned before about some of the benefits that these smaller localized organizations would have. If account management and a trusted relationship has been something that the supply your incumbents or others across different categories are lacking, well, maybe it's because there are 4 or 5 layers of account management above and below the one you got assigned, and maybe they've got you as one of 5 different clients they're trying to manage at the same time. Whereas if you work sometimes working with a local one, there are possibilities where you get nickel and dimed less
Correct.
with change orders, modifications, all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, I mean, I'm a big believer in I want my supply base to be diversified, and I mean it this way. I have large organizations that I have to do business with, right? I mean, that's just the way life goes. But when it comes to my tactical efforts, my subcontractors, my um et cetera, I want to be looking at par or kind of um I'm a growth strategy for them. I want a vendor strategy to be me. I don't want them to be mine. And what I mean by that is I'm going to try and sell upward, right? I want to sell to large organizations. I want to sell to mid-market, right? That's who I want to do business with. And in the same respect, I'm telling these same procurement people, you should be looking at par or down for your supply base because they
Hmm.
should be who you should be who they're aspiring to work with.
and that ends up being, if you end up being who they want to be when they grow up, because I want to
Yeah.
be you when I grow up. But then it sounds like the negotiation or the ongoing relationship actually could be more strategic.
Correct. Every supplier relationship, and I'm procurement, so we look at the Pareto, I'm not talking your tail, right? But every supplier relationship, let's start critical and then let's jump past critical, and now we're still going to move into top spend number of transaction, right? We're going to look at that through three different categories for who is our strategic. Critical. You're going to bring my business down if you stop working today. Um, the sheer number of transactions that I have with you dictate that you are vital to my organization, right? You might not, your product or service might not be critical, but the number of efforts that we put out to work with each other is so significant. You're really important. You're strategic. And then dollar amount. If I pay you a lot, if I pay you a top percentage of my spend, you're a vital partner for my organization
Yeah, yeah, and
and strategic. And
that's
and
that's the that you know that's the rub oftentimes for us is having to then show the data in a way to executives in that way that's not solely spend driven, right?
correct, correct. Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of critical, like you should know who your top three critical suppliers are. You shouldn't have six critical suppliers. You should have probably less than three, generally. If you have more than that, something's weird. Something's weird, looked into it, right? But generally speaking, that small handful of critical suppliers, again, they're the ones who are going to shut your company down or ruin your reputation in a moment. And that's vital. That's vital, and that's really a leadership involvement. So that one actually to me um, supersedes kind of procurement, right? That's a
Yeah.
leadership partnership relationship. But everybody else, that's how we jump into strategy. That's how we think
Hmm.
about how to identify. One of the things I was talking about at ISM is really how to split down your supplier base broken down by category, and then understand your concentration. What's the concentration of each of your categories? And I don't know enough CPOs that just kind of take the stop and the pause and review of looking through that particular lens.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking through the lens of, holy moly, four suppliers have 70% of my spend in one category, that's a risk. That it is not about procurement anymore, right? And
Mm.
and we need to be, in my perspective, we need to be able to identify where risk begins so that we're looking at it through the perspective of, I need to speak about mitigation. I don't need to speak about cost savings, right? We're still going to look for cost savings as we're mitigating a problem. But number one view is we need to get some of this spend out of the hands of just four. And we need to diversify, again, not talking supplier diversity,
Yeah, yeah,
diversify
yeah, yeah.
that over a supply base that if there's, again, where's our redundancies, right? And that is the great equalizer right there, right? Is
Hmm.
ensuring that we're looking through that particular lens through risk.
Well, before we go into the uh, the big topic that we want to kind of bring this together, just want to invite everyone that's on the webinar today. If you do have questions or comments for Lisa or me, I'm happy to chime in if I need to in the chat feature here on Zoom. So now that we've talked about bold sourcing, intentional, going against the grain, so to speak, from our 6-year-old lives, to then understanding the benefits of small, medium, and local enterprises and that benefit there of continue, furthering the American dream for
Hmm.
everyone and our own jobs as we
Yep.
work in those localities. Now we go into the ISM theme of AI. Now we've talked about some of the problem statements or some of the challenges and opportunities. What the heck does AI? What the heck could AI help in all of this?
I'm a fan of AI, and I'm a fan of AI in the respect that I do a lot of redundant work, as many procurement people do, right? So I'm able to, and I implemented AI as part of my mechanisms years ago, and it's been really successful, and I continue to build it out. I love the idea that AI, to me, AI is the great equalizer for small businesses because things that used to take, X number of hours take less hours. And that's very nice if you're a small organization of, 10 or less, you're able to kind of uh, even out your output. Um, where I think there becomes some challenges is the expectation that AI is going to get rid of every single job in an organization and everything will be done through AI. Like again, it's just these big brushstrokes that are made that I find to be a little bit nerve-wracking. AI to me is a slow roll. It's how do we, first of all, ensuring that your teams are going out and receiving the ample training that they need based on the requirements, right? What are you having them do? And are they getting the actual support and skill set to perform these functions? The reinvestment from staff from current staff and investing in those staff to bring themselves up to speed in I think is going to be a critical factor. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what we're seeing is these organizations are pulling AI certified people into the mix and then letting go all of that legacy experience and knowledge. And that to me is a big misstep. And we're not seeing that
Mm-hmm.
misstep in small businesses, which I'm happy to report, right? In small businesses, we're seeing large investments in how to ensure that our processes are run cleanly, smoothly through AI. I also want to put out the big statement of I do find AI to be a biased organization. There's a lot of a biased system, um, and that's going to create its own problems as AI continues to grow on bad information. It's going to continue to output bad information. This is the data of the 2000s story all over again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jumped onto all these wonderful systems because they offered us bells and whistles. AI is offering us bells and whistles. We're doing the old input crap, output crap, and then how did that happen? What
Yep.
happened because we didn't create our strategy.
I'm hearing more of that conversation about 26 years ago in the dot-com era versus now. As that dialogue continues, I'm hearing about that more and more. But the folks are trying to say it's not the same, it's not the same, it's not the same. But I'm constantly reminded of the fervor, the addiction, the excitement, and the companies
Yes.
that blossom out of the companies that blossomed out of it, the salaries that blossomed out of it as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just, I don't know where, if there's a particular question you want to broach, but I think, if I were thinking about, and as I am thinking about, because when I go into these organizations and we're talking about the implementation of I think there are wonderful aspects of it. Writing an RFP using AI, I'm going to point to Flip Through as a wonderful process, wonderful program, right? It's I'm not that's the program I know. I'm familiar with it. So, I'm going to put that what I've seen of it, the creation of an RFP is remarkable. The ability, however, to have one negotiating bot negotiate with another bot. Um, I'm call me a control freak. That's okay. I'm I want to sit down and have a conversation with a human being and be able to because our relationship, again, if I have made the assumption, which I do, that suppliers that are non-transactional become part of my strategy of my organization, they become part of part of my team. I'm not going to go so far. They're an arm of my organization, whatever the language is you want to talk about it, they're intimate enough that they are performing a service or function for me
Mm-hmm.
I want to know that my voice, my team's voice, spoke to their voice, their team's voice, and it didn't happen through a bot. And that we've had conversations that identify the nuance of language around building out a contract which is factual and straightforward, and also built on intention.
Hmm. So I guess then it sounds like the takeaway for AI though is um, everyone should at least start to get a general exposure and invest the time in playing with it.
Absolutely.
Just
Absolutely.
playing with it, creating your
Yes.
first agent,
Yeah.
um, trying out, hey, with a prompt, write me an RFI, write me a market assessment or questionnaire for suppliers in office supplies or event planning or whatever it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great idea that you had event planning and you had pens, or office supplies. When I think about, there's not much less transactional than the act of buying pens, buying office supplies.
Yep.
Here in Massachusetts, we have an organization that they are very well known. Their trucks show, they are a great local organization, WB Mason, right? Very local organization. And they run an extension. We're an extension of your team, and you need a pen, we're gonna bring you that pen. And the
Hmm.
gentleman shows up in his little van and he delivers you your pen. Um, I say that because that's sales. That's not the act of procurement. And as much as I believe that procurement and sales are the opposite sides of the same coin, I do believe that. And that to me is an example of this is a transactional office supply organization that wants to deliver your goods so that you see them, you know them. It's the same person who's going to show up every day. We're building that person to person relationship.
Hmm.
And I'm going to turn that coin and I'm going to from procurement. And I think I want that same interaction from the procurement perspective, not so much when I'm buying the act of buying the pen, but the act of, you mentioned event planning, a great idea, right? If I'm talking to event planning and she says, "Do you want this with, pink frills?" And I go, "Oh, I want her to know, means not, probably not, right?" Whatever that kind of human contact requirement is, because if I'm the procurement person and I'm buying that service, it's imperative to me that that human being sees and hears me. From that other perspective, it's imperative for that sales team that their salespeople are out there seeing the recipients of their products and services.
Hmm.
So I understand and recognize the need, desire, the want, the savings around negotiation bots. I'm generally speaking, and again, big brushstroke, because I think we can certainly dive into specific moments in time where it works. But I'm going to go with a good solid 80% of the time. It should be a human being that's talking to a human being because that's where that relationship is going to be able to be built and create change.
Well, then it sounds like other applications that might be more helpful before we go to this question is vendor screening, vendor due diligence could be automated to have some
Yep.
crawling in there. Um, dr- an RFI, doing a market assessment, pulling them, getting those questionnaires can be easily done. Um, Rec to PO can be automated like that.
Yeah,
Routing
so
approvals, those kinds of things can definitely be done.
all
Then
those redundant
those
processes.
redundant, asking for certificates of insurance, getting
Yes.
recertification, all the valid ones, a lot of that stuff can be automated.
So
Easy.
I currently work with an organization, Nectar IQ, and I introduced you
Yeah.
to them. Yeah. So, this is, they're an intelligence hub. So they're going to be pulling information in through API, through all other resources, right? To your point, if you have an onboarding system, that onboarding information is going to be brought into the platform and sit inside the platform. You're going to see the EcoVadis, you're going to see the rapid ratings, you're going to see the Archer, you're going to see, all of the different systems that you're doing business with because they're vital data points. and how you capture that information and is going to allow you to make good choices and good decisions.
Hmm.
One of the things I also kind of teach my students around supply chain is vital to knowing as close as an event happens, whatever the event, something happens negatively, if there's a risk, the sooner supply chain understands that that event happened, the sooner they can respond to it, the better the organization's going to be. So how do we encapsulate all of that information into one intelligence hub by capturing all of that necessary information that's going to be feeding, some of which is done, to your point, through AI, right? Some of that is automated systems that are going to be able to pull information in. But it really is about having that bird's eye view and an understanding with full clarity and consistent evaluation against all of the other suppliers,
Hmm.
not negatively or positively, well, this is a small business. Because you'll never hear me say continue to do business with a small business who isn't completing their responsibilities per contract.
Yeah.
That's not what this is, right? This is procurement first, discovery better, going out and identifying those small suppliers that and having that bench of suppliers. How do you retain them? You do that through good relationship. And
Hmm.
how do you build that relationship? You do that through development.
Well, with the few minutes we still have left, I want to respond to Yufan Liao's question. There are organizations in the process of looking at small local indigenous vendor strategies and a detailed classification. This detailed classification has been developed, adapted. However, a lot of the historical data, even on a Pareto basis, is um, there's some data missing, right?
Yeah.
So would AI be is would
No.
AI be helpful as an application for this, or would you recommend something else?
So, I mean, again, I just mentioned their name, which is funny because I'm not here to promote them. But one of the things that I found most appealing about Nectar IQ was this particular moment in time. The inability for the other platforms that I had used to rewrite historical reports based on what we had, right? We all know this story. You pull a report, you submit a report, you continue on with your life. Quarters have gone by, somebody asks you about something 3 quarters ago, and you go back and you try and pull a report that's based in historical um, reality, and you're not there, right? Because it's now changing based on the current portfolio or current picture of that supplier. Um, I am going to say that Nectar IQ is the only one that I've seen, which is one of the reasons I went literally running into their arms when there's a couple of different points that were vital to me, and that was one of them. Um, so I don't know an AI prompt that recreates or enhances the portfolio and rewrites back to the old report. I just don't know how to do that, but you
Oh,
found I'd be
okay.
happy to speak to you another time.
Yeah, Yufan, we can happy to connect you with Lisa. Not a problem. We'll be happy to do that. But Yufan, to your point, I think there are some limitations there. I mean, there's a way to do some crawling. Having an AI bot do some crawling out there. But there's so many different layers of certification, especially if you're going through looking at indigenous vendors. There's so many different layers about to what degree someone is really considered indigenous to a nation these days. So it might be a little difficult, but it's definitely a worthwhile effort. If Lisa can introduce you to Nectar IQ, that might
Yeah,
be an option, at least going as a next step.
I'd be happy to. And I think to the indigenous conversation, I used to do about 60 or 70% of my business out of Canada until some of the relationships changed. And meaning the federal government changed, and these organizations have said it doesn't look great for us to have a US citizen on our books. There we are. So but one of the wonderful projects that I worked on was building out. So the federal government of Canada had been restructuring what in what their supplier diversity, or for them, really what their indigenous requirements were around spend. And I was able to work on a project, and I had no idea that I didn't know what I didn't know until I learned it while I was in Canada. And then to come back here into the United States and be working with one of the casinos here in the United States, a indigenous casino, and understanding the requirements there. One, I was able to work with a little more ease. And two, we don't have the same depth of kind of wonderful historical knowledge that Canada really should pride themselves on having around indigenous populations.
Awesome. Well, this has been again just like two friends just chatting along, and I'm thrilled that we've had such active participation and folks that wanted to hang on to every word you've said today. How would they best connect with you, Lisa?
Sure, they can reach out to me. LinkedIn is probably always best. Lisa Westgate, and my organization is LN Westgate LLC. Um,
Very good. Very good.
yeah,
Well,
great
again, on
to
behalf, thanks so much. On behalf of ISM Carolinas, Virginia, and ISM and Ellen Westgate, thank you so much for your time today. Please look forward to our June installment. We will be having an international guest, Miss Susan Walsh.
Mm.
Right, rock
Good
star.
one.
Right.
That's a rock star. Yes.
So look forward to that. Please be on the lookout on our calendar and our social media posts for those dates and times. But again, now, thank you so much, Lisa. Always a pleasure to see you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your Thursday and a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.